So how do I know how that wind turbine engine on wind turbine number 1, 2, 3, 4 is doing? Let's open up ChatGPT. ChatGPT comes up with all kinds of crazy stuff like, well,
Mhm.
wind turbine is this, that engine is
Mhm.
this, and it's all generic based, right? It's nothing to do with your wind turbine or
Mhm.
your wind turbine engine,
Mhm.
right? So he gets into IFS and he opens it up and then he asks IFS the same questions. Tell
Mhm.
me about wind turbine 1, 2, 3, 4 and the motor on it. When do I need to conduct maintenance? And it pulls up all these metrics. If you add it in right. Now, the key here is some of these documents need to be loaded into the program so that they become searchable data, right? But it pulled up the diagnostic specs from historical past. It pulled up the runtime. It pulled up a diagram, the instruction manual, all of these
Mhm.
things that tell you everything you need to know about this wind turbine, and then was able to provide recommendations based on its runtime and previous failure rates and failure rates of other engines like it. This is when you need to conduct your preventative maintenance. That's high impact.
Mhm.
ChatGPT is handy, but when you're talking about making a difference for your business, it's got to be connected to your business. It can't
Mhm.
just be connected to the internet. So that was a really cool analogy of all of the things that I learned this week from that, which was many things. IFS is a great product. I met a
Yeah.
lot of great people.
Mhm.
That was the one that's going to stick with me the most.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an excellent overview of kind of talking about all of the different aspects that come into building an AI strategy that's going to have a higher valuable impact in your organization. I think we've seen this evolution from, experimental AI of just saying we need AI somehow. We need to understand what that looks like, exploratory budgets, to really
Yes.
moving into how does this create an impact. And so I'm going to kind of back up. Let's do some definitions real quick. And I'm going to use one of our questions here to talk about what is high impact AI just in general. So, high impact AI, in the way that we define it in our speed to value methodology, when it comes to implementing AI, that's when we take AI and implement it in your organization, business unit by business unit or user group by user group, create that speed and implementation and then proven results that can scale to the next area. So, this question, if you're listening on our audio format, is do you define AI's impact by cost savings, revenue growth, user experience, or something else entirely? And this is a great question because all of these could potentially be high impact. But the core of this question is really what you need to be asking yourself as an organization. What is my why? What am I trying to achieve? Am I trying to achieve understanding predictive maintenance when my wind turbine needs to be maintained or there needs to be some sort of update to that? What am I trying to define? So I'm not wasting money on a broken piece of equipment. Or am I trying to garner user experience through launching an agentic IT help bot? So that I'm focusing those calls that are frequently coming into my IT team, I can free them up to do something more strategic. So, this is something that you need to sit down as a leadership within your organization, answer before you're talking about AI, because we're not chasing the AI, right? The strategy needs to come first and the AI needs to align with what that looks like. So, this question, just to start, is such an excellent question to go in, but it's going to take alignment throughout your organization to understand what that looks like. And then it's also going to take highly defined project management to continue to look at that why as a journey throughout the project, not just a destination that you secured in the beginning.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. If you want to figure out how to measure the impact of AI, that's like asking, how do I measure the impact of an employee? Well, what do they do? Are we talking about sales? Are we talking about, um, uh, you know, um, an engineer? They're very different. Their value to your bottom line is very different. Right? Obviously, you want to start thinking about revenue, cost savings, those types of things that are the metrics that measure the health of a business. But AI should be targeted. It's not something that you just plug in and say it's going to do everything and it's going
Mhm.
to provide value everywhere. That's just simply not how that's going to work. I love that question, and it just kind of helps convey, in total agreement with you, that this is something that it needs to be a targeted strategy for how it is you start things.
So, this question specifically is talking about what criteria do you recommend for identifying AI tools that will have a high impact versus those that are just hype? And this can go into the conversation around what Kevin Miller was talking about. Are you using a platform based AI or are you using your own AI that really focuses on the business, has your business data sets kind of moved in there? Also, I think just sprinkling in that this is coming from IFS, which is an established ERP MES manufacturing vendor already in the marketplace. We've talked a lot about the risks of working with a newer AI vendor. That doesn't mean that these vendors aren't a great asset to your overall technology stack. You just have to remember that these types of established vendors a lot of times are going to have kind of their research and development leg that's established within their organization. So Adam, I will let you take the first stab at this question, then we can kind of talk about the different
Yeah.
options here.
Well, I love this question for so many reasons, particularly because it highlights the position that we play in the marketplace, right? The answer is it's hard to tell, right? A lot of the things that are going to come up are going to be absolute trash and they're not going to seem like it, but you got to figure out how to tell the difference quickly. And that's where it is we can help with a lot of this and being able to at least provide the first, second, third cut as to that sounds legit or yeah, the first round of the conversation is solid, and then you start to dig a level deeper. You start to dig a level deeper, and they run out of gas, right? I would say that moving fast is important, but
Mhm,
doing the work is also important,
mhm,
right? We need to be able to say IFS is an established program. They've been around for decades, right? So the idea that their AI is going to be around tomorrow and next year is pretty reliable, right? As the AI industry continues to evolve, there will be a lot of things that kind of dry up. People who run out
mhm,
of funding because they couldn't get things to stick. People who get swallowed up and taken off the shelf because
mhm.
somebody doesn't want that product. I am curious to see how much of that happens,
Yeah.
right? AI can do a lot to disrupt multi-billion-dollar enterprises. And so somebody out there is going to try to buy things and say,
Mhm,
I want that off the shelf so that I protect my own revenue. So
mhm,
there's a lot of that in there. What I love about this is it reemphasizes a habit that is there and AI will make happen faster. Those silos that are indicative of the lack of a cohesive strategy, right? AI will simply entrench those silos. And if you don't make it something that for us at the Confluential, we call them confluences, right?
mhm,
Where are the areas where things come together to be able to maximize the value of combining things,
mhm.
right? In your business, the places that your most important work streams confluence aren't a net add. They're not this plus that. They're multipliers. And so you put AI on top of that strategically by breaking those silos down and you allow that cross-functional confluential work stream to thrive, then you're really adding value. And this is where we start having a high impact on this stuff. So it's, for me, those are some of the key components of looking at this. It all comes back to that strategy. You have to start at the beginning. Why are we doing this? And if the answer is we're doing this because we're not, we if we don't, we'll fall behind. That's not good enough. Fall behind on what? Market capture, revenue gains, costs. Where some folks consider falling behind to be oriented more towards branding or towards being able to capture new talent. These are all very different
Mhm.
organizational strategies that drive very different AI strategies. So you're
Absolutely.
adding to your organization, and that addition is AI. Know what it is you're doing it and why, so that we can start thinking about the tactics that we use to accomplish that strategy, and then push it into the work streams that matter, the processes, the people that are involved with them, and those types of things.
Absolutely. So, question, right? So, you and your team built this proprietary speed to value implementation that you've seen kind of with an agile AI implementation.
Yes.
So, you go in, you implement the AI after you've decided what these high impact metrics will look like. What does high impact mean
Mhm.
to the organization? So, does it create silos when you have one organization that's going through or one business unit that's going through an AI implementation? How do you make it that true or holistic strategy to
That's a
Sam's point
fantastic
here?
question. I love that question because and I got to think my way through how it is I want to reply to it. Because to a certain extent, yeah, you want to pick something that is a small enough proof of concept, right? I'm a firm believer, especially when we think about agile and AI, that those two things go together. And for me, picking a proof of concept, starting small, plugging in an AI, and then iterating on that, allowing it to grow, is how you do that. Now, that could force you to pick a pretty succinct and concise use case. What you should still do, though, is that use case should still be part of a larger tactic and a larger strategy that conveys more work on the how do I impact a particular metric, right? If we're talking about cost savings, where are those cost savings coming from and how are we going to achieve them? And then how are we going to deploy AI to do that? Maybe AI is going to be to
Mhm,
turn just loose on inventory terms. And we're just going to
mhm,
start with that. Or supplier sourcing. We're going to
mhm.
analyze our quotes more effectively and our quality and our lead time from our suppliers. We're going to target that piece. That doesn't mean that that needs to just belong in a piece that includes just supply chain, right? Let's take that supplier
Yeah.
example and run with it. We've got to figure out how to deploy an AI. Here's our use case, right? Our strategy I'm going to reduce my costs in supply chain and in manufacturing. So we're going to target the supply to the beginning of the supply chain. How do I target my vendors for higher quality, better lead times, and increase lower prices, right? Low prices, high quality, good lead times. That's what we want. We're going to deploy AI and figuring out how it is we use our quotes to figure out what it is they say. And then we're going to use that AI to
Mhm.
target the actual outcomes. They said they're going to
Mhm.
do this. This is what's happening now. So, what we can do with that analysis is now, if we do this and we get these results, this is how it's going to impact our manufacturing process and our ability to meet our customers' lead times. Now, what happens if we say these guys are faster, but they're slightly less quality, just a little
Mhm.
less, faster to delivery? What's the scenario if I go with the folks that are faster in that space? Well, it's going to drive our lead
Mhm.
times this way to our delivery to our customers, and it's going to increase our returns from our customers by X amount. Is that a positive or a net gain? Versus if I add 2, 3
Mhm.
days to our lead times and increase our quality of supply substantially. Now all of a sudden my returns are zero. How does this impact my bottom line, right? That small scenario in AI, we can ask it to target that, and then we can ask it to look at those
Mhm.
cost savings later. And it can be a minute sample
Mhm.
that creates a cross-functional target and a cross-functional value. So that's how you break that down. You look at how supply chain in
Yeah.
this case creates a confluence between our raw materials and our delivery, on time and quality delivery to our customers, and how do we fit into that in the middle and how do we impact the most important